Would you just tell us something about yourself?
Something or?
Something, introduce yourself to us.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If we haven't met before, my full name is Laura Jane Grace McClarty, and that's how I used to answer the phone when I was a kid. Something about me, I am an English teacher at Nunawading Christian College, and I absolutely love my job.
There we go. So you work as a teacher, but I want you to begin maybe by casting your mind back to when you were a student. And what was your experience like with God way back when you were, say, a teenager and, relating to God at school? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Before I get too into things, my mum is here from New South Wales today, so it's really lovely to have her here. And also my brother is here, but he lives here now. You're still very special, but you haven't travelled as far, but thank you for being here. So kind of along that line, when I grew up in a Christian family. Both mum and dad were Christians and took us to church. We went to a Christian school. And my mum was also a teacher at the school that I went to, and also the head of middle school when I was in middle school. And so growing up, in terms of my childhood, I was very familiar with Christianity, very familiar with Jesus and the stories of the Bible. And when I got to high school, I kind of, amongst my grade, often would be referred to as Mrs. McClarty's daughter, which I was so fine with because I love my mum and so did everyone else. So I was more than happy to be connected to her in that way. Other than, I guess with that came some assumptions about who I was, the kind of person that I was and what I believed in. And I think a lot of people, because I was a teacher's daughter, were like, oh, she's so well behaved and a goody two-shoes. They weren't wrong. But I think also, the assumptions that came with that was, oh, she must be a Christian because her mum's a Christian and all that kind of stuff. And so other people made those assumptions about me, but I also made those assumptions about myself. That because my parents were Christians and I went to a Christian school, that automatically meant I was in the Christian club. But I didn't really know what that meant. And so when I was in probably year 9, it kind of became the cool thing at school to hate chapel and to roll your eyes when you saw it on your timetable. And when we do worship, everyone would just kind of stand there and just talk without actually singing. And it was the done thing in my year level to just not like chapel. So when I was in about year 9 and 10, I was part of that. And around that time, I started questioning the teacher's daughter label and whether having a faith was something that was mine or whether it was something that was my family's. And at that point, I stopped going to church. I wasn't really involved as much. I would go when I was singing, but that was pretty much it. And then when I was in year 11, one of my close friends we went into the city to go see the X Factor live auditions, which was really cool. And then coincidentally, I didn't know this at the time, but coincidentally Hillsong Conference happened to be on at the same time. And she was like, oh, the night sessions are free. We're thinking of popping in. Is that okay? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, we'll go. And so I went to the night session and there was this moment during worship, and I remember sharing a couple weeks ago that for me, music is a way that I really connect with God, and that's how I feel connected to him and can worship him. And I had this moment during worship there when they did an altar call moment, asking everyone to close their eyes and put up their hands if they wanted to have that personal relationship with Jesus. And I remember kind of standing there rolling my eyes being like, okay, when can we go home? And then I felt my hands raising, and I was like, Laura, stop it, don't be weird. It's almost over, you just have to wait. But my hands were going up, and I didn't feel like I had any control over it. And so that night, that's kind of when it really hit me, the personal relationship with Jesus aspect of it, and that's something that I didn't really have before. So from that point, that's when I started to kind of look more into it for myself, and develop that personal relationship.
Yeah, so, Christian home, surrounded by Christianity, but not until those later years where you really discover that personal walk with Jesus. Now, the big sort of thing that you want to share with us is how you came to be here in Melbourne. So as you shared, you're on the Central Coast, and now you live in Melbourne and you work in Melbourne. Tell us that story. How did that all unfold?
Yeah. So halfway through year 12, we had to put in our uni preferences, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I thought, I really love English and literature, and Mum said that when I was in preschool, I would go into the younger preschool rooms and read books to them. So I think everyone knew I was going to be an English teacher before I did. So I just applied, and I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. We'll see how it goes. And then I got into teaching at the University of Sydney and then also at Avondale University. And yeah, a lot of kind of prayer and consideration went into where I should go. And when we stepped foot on Avondale's campus for a tour with my parents, we were just like, this is where I need to be. So I studied at Avondale, and then in my final year, we have this kind of panel interview process where different state directors from ASA come to the university, interview the students who are going to graduate just to get to know them, and then we're kind of on the radar for jobs that will be coming up. And I wasn't intending on working in the Adventist system, but I was like, it's a good opportunity, I'll try it out. And then did the interviews and kind of forgot about it. And then my last placement I did at Central Coast Adventist School and loved it. And I was kind of thinking to myself, I could see myself working here. If a job comes up, I'll apply for it. And that way I can stay living on the Central Coast with my family and adjust to working full-time with all of the other things in my life being the same, so that the only change was starting working full-time, because I was like, that will help me adjust. And so I did my placement, and then a job came up and I applied for it. After I sent in my application, I got a phone call from Brian Mercer, who at the time was the state director for ASV. He called me up and he said, when we did the interviews earlier this year, your name came up as someone who would be a good English teacher, I guess. And he said, we have a position for an English teacher in Melbourne. And at this point, I was actually on my computer in my room, and so I opened up Photo Booth, because I just couldn't believe this was happening to me. So I recorded, and I was just sitting there, recording my reaction to this phone call. And I was like, this is wild. I'm getting a call to go and do a job in Melbourne. This wasn't even something I thought about. And then I went downstairs, and I told Mum, and I was like, so this just happened? And she was like, oh, okay. And then, I did the interview and eventually got offered both of the jobs and had, I think, 3 days to decide what I wanted to do.
Something that's going to change your entire future.
Yeah, definitely.
In 3 days.
Yeah. So that was kind of the biggest decision I've ever made in my life. I guess, spoiler alert, you obviously know what decision I made, and I don't regret it one bit. But yeah, those 3 days were emotionally exhausting, very intense. And the process of making that decision wasn't easy. I had made my own plans and laid out where I saw my life going. And then God, kind of tapped on my shoulder and said, haha. And I was like, oh no. But yeah, so through those 3 days, I spoke to a lot of different people who are instrumental in my life and whose perspectives I really value. Obviously, I talked to my family about it a lot. I had some spiritual mentors at my old church that I called or caught up for coffee with. I called some lecturers, and everyone that I spoke to, I was kind of hoping that they would tell me what to do, because then it wouldn't be in my hands if things went wrong. But at the time, I didn't like that no one told me what to do, but now I'm really grateful that that's what happened. But yeah, every person I spoke to kind of heard me out, heard how I was feeling, what I was thinking, and didn't tell me what to do, but just kind of affirmed that whatever decision that I would make, that it would be a good one, and if things didn't work out, that it would be okay. And I prayed about it a lot, and I remember one night I was sitting at the dinner table with Mum and Dad, and throughout this whole process, I was kind of yo-yoing between two states of emotion. On one hand, I was feeling really numb and like it wasn't real and that it wasn't happening to me because I just didn't expect it. And then on the other hand, it was feeling very real and I was feeling very overwhelmed about it. And this night, it was one of those ends, and I had just been crying a little bit. And then I looked to Mum and I said, I think the reason why I'm so upset and I'm crying so much about this is because I know the decision that I need to make and it scares me. And then when I said that, I was like, yep, I think that's it. And then I slept on it, and then the next day I was like, yep, I'm going to accept the job in Melbourne. And so I called Megan, because she interviewed me, and I said, I'm going to accept the job. And here I am.
Yeah, wow. And it's something we all can relate to, making these big decisions in life and feeling so much weight on those decisions. So this series is called God's Story in Me. Where did you see God at work in your story?
I love an analogy, and I love connecting one idea to another, classic English teacher behaviour. But when I was a kid, I obviously was very chatty and I asked a lot of questions. And when I grew up, Mum told me that for my brother and I, whenever we would come to Mum or Dad with something as little kids and we would want to tell them something, they would always listen and always give their full attention. So that by demonstrating that they would listen to us with the little things, when it came to the big things, we would feel a lot more comfortable to trust in them and to take it to them, because we have these, examples in the past when they have listened to us and taken us seriously. And so that behaviour being modelled to myself and James from our parents, that being able to trust in them with the smaller things and bring the smaller things to them made it a lot easier to bring the big things to them as well. And so I guess God's story in me in this whole process was having that personal relationship with Jesus and being able to start trusting him and bringing the smaller things to him meant that when it came to the biggest thing, I felt comfortable to put it before him, and I knew that whichever way it was going to go, that God would have me, and even if it was hard, that I could lean on him and I could trust that he would listen to me and protect me and look after me. So that was probably the main takeaway for me.
Yeah, awesome. So the little things in your life actually became very significant in developing this walk with God that was there for when the big thing hit. That's really awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to share, or final words, or was that your... Yep.
Probably one other thing. Obviously, as I said, I made my own plans, and I could picture what my life would look like because I'd worked at the school. I obviously knew what it was like to live with my family. I had an established group of friends, and I had a church that I was going to. And so if I had taken the other job, I would have been very happy, and it was an amazing school, and it would have been great to work there. But I knew exactly what my life would look like, and I didn't see myself being challenged a whole lot. On the other hand, coming down here, there was so many unknowns. I didn't think I was going to know anyone. I didn't know where I would go to church. I didn't know what friends I would have. And there was a lot of unknowns. And I think when I had planned to stay on the coast, I'd made my own plans that I was happy with and that I was comfortable with, but I wasn't actually putting this kind of next step in my life before God and making myself open ahead of time to where he may have been leading me. If I had, maybe I would have made other plans or been more aware of other opportunities, but I wasn't making myself available at that point. So sometimes it can be really easy. If you're a planner, if you like to know what's happening, it can be really easy to just make your plans and run with them. But like I said, trusting in God with those little things and then the big things as well. If you're bringing those things before God and making yourself available to him, you have the opportunity to do some really great things. And it would have been a real shame if I hadn't been available or been open to that, because I would have missed out on this. And so I'm really grateful that, kind of through Brian and through Megan and through all these other people, that God was able to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you actually need to go here. So making myself available to that. I think, in your life, if there's something that you're considering or you're thinking about, whether it's a little thing or a big thing, putting it before God and being open to hear where he wants you to go, a lot of blessings could lie in wait for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us, LJ, and for reminding us that God is that parent who wants to journey with us in the small things and the big. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, next up we have Dominic. Make your way up the front. And there we go. Well, Dom, like with LJ, there's probably some people here who know you really, really well, and probably some people here who are looking at you going, I've never seen that person there before in this church. Tell us something about yourself. Introduce yourself to us.
Firstly, I'm Dominic, Dom, anything. Married to Stephanie. As we know, there's 3 Stephanies in this church. It's this one in the center. Also, we got married, and we have 2 wonderful kids, Ashley and Sebastian. Yeah.
Well, so what I got LJ to share with us was what her walk with God was like earlier on in her experience. What about for you? When you were younger, what role did God play in your life?
It was hard. My journey with God only started, I was born in the Catholic faith. I wasn't born in a Christian way as an Adventist, so I've never grown up as an Adventist. Only born in a Catholic faith, not knowing the Bible, not knowing God. It was hard. As a Catholic, you follow tradition, no matter what. As you follow one tradition after the other. You don't question it. You just follow it. You go to church on most of the festive holidays, Christmas, Easter, weddings, funerals. That's how growing up in a church was for me. The most more towards my walk with God happened as a teen when suddenly my grandmother passed away. She went into the hospital just for a normal checkup and didn't come out. And
what role? How did that? So that's happened suddenly, and how did that impact your walk with God?
It impacted me because I did not know God. I knew God as a figure up in heaven. I didn't have a feeling that He was with me together, which I know now. I always thought I put the blame on Him. To why did He do that? Why did He kill? Why did it happen? Why did my grandmother pass away? That's the first time I've ever experienced death, and it's shaken me and my beliefs in a sense that this is not right. So I wanted answers. So I went to the priest, as you know, born a Catholic. Also, going to a Catholic school, we had access to priests and all that. Asking questions to them, and can you help me? I'm hurting. And none of the answers they gave me was sort of correct, and I always had more questions, but less answers, and I felt sort of hatred, I think, towards God at that time. I felt this is not right, and I've sort of dropped away from God during the late teens, until suddenly when we decided later in life, changing from a Catholic school to a state school, and I have this feeling, God had this feeling for me. He brought Steph to me, and Steph, as we know, we've been together for more than 25 years, but we've known each other for at least 30. Going to school, one from a Catholic school, Steph from a SDA school, crossing paths. And I feel that God brought us together, even though it was just friends at the moment. During high school, we were just friends. The last couple of years of school, everybody enjoyed, we met, we'd known each other, we talked to each other, but not until later on in life.
So you met Steph, you fell in love with her, and through that whole thing, you sort of met Jesus in a more relational way as well.
I believe, yeah, I did, because Jesus my journey started at a young age, at late teens, early 20s. And Steph opened my eyes to open my eyes in a way that we were allowed to believe in telling me stories. That don't have to hear the stories. Read the Bible. As a Catholic, you don't read a Bible. You listen to what the priests have said. And no Catholic, I'll be honest, I've never opened the Bible in my early days. Since Steph coming into my life, we started going to church down at Springvale, and it opened my eyes in thinking there's more than a pastor or a priest talking to you. The Bible is there.
Yeah, wow. So there's your sort of early experience and journey with God. Now, one of the things you wanted to share with us today was a really terrible accident that happened in your family. Would you mind sharing with us what happened there?
About 12 years ago, on my 40th birthday, Steph decided to have a special secret birthday outing. It's go-karting. And she always said, well, you always going to love go-karting. And I think, yeah, I drive a car. Okay, go-karting, okay. So Steph took a day off from work. Prior to that, the Sunday, we had a special 40th birthday for all the young kids we had, with all our friends. Ashley was 2 years old at that time. So we decided Steph decided the Monday will be your day. Like, we'll go out go-karting, we'll do all, and on the way, Steph gets a phone call. Our go-karting venue canceled on us. So she had to rebook somewhere else in the city, beyond the city, outside of the city. We've never driven beyond certain parts of the city. So, as we were driving along, as the old generation will know, we always had Melways. I was the navigator, not a good navigator, but I was the navigator. Steph, on the other hand, was the driver. Very good driver, but the navigation was not the best. So we pulled in at a petrol station, asked for directions. Basically, can you tell us how to get here? We were told, and we decided, let's go. And we drove on. This is the point that I remember. After this point, I have no recollection on what happened. Steph, police reports have told me what happened. So as we were driving down the highway, turning away into the traffic was bad, so we had to slow down. And then suddenly, a truck speeding, we don't know, going 80 kilometers, using basically our car as a brake. He did not brake until the last moment. We had an I-30 station wagon. It sandwiched the station wagon. It flung the car around. At that point, I'm unconscious. I'm only hearing the stories what Steph's told me, what police reports have told me. And the most heartbreaking thing was that Steph, on an unconsciousness, woke up slightly to see me, the passenger side, bleeding with hard to breathe. And that was the most heartening thing that I've sort of witnessed afterwards, because you don't want any of your loved ones to witness that kind of trauma. As for myself, I was unconscious. I had no recollection on what happened. And as we moved on, the accident, it's hard. I faced 6 weeks, 7 weeks in hospitals, rehab, still having pains. But the belief in God, I believe that my journey with God at that time, I was helped by God. It saved me in many ways. It saved me that I would not blame God for what has happened. I blame it was an accident. I don't blame God for causing the accident. I was lucky. God saved us. He saved us throughout the day, throughout that time, and all the time. I don't blame him for what it's up. I've ended up with broken bones. I've ended up with memory loss. And the most important thing is that I and Steph are alive. That was the main thing. God saved us during that accident. Everybody's telling me from people, religious people, and to family saying, look what God did to you. And I say to everyone, God saved us. He did not put us in that harm's way. The devil put the driver in harm's way by giving him the phone, letting him use the phone while driving. That was the cause of the accident.
And I remember when you shared this with me last week, one of the things that really stood out to me was how when you had that early experience as a younger Dom, where your grandmother died, how that really drove you away from God. Whereas here now you've had this really difficult, this terrible accident, and yet you found yourself closer to God than you've ever been before. Why do you think that was your experience the second time?
If I wasn't brought up with Steph, if God did not bring Steph in my life and bring God towards my life, I would have, if I had the accident as I was as a young child now, I would have been blaming God for everything. As I've grown up, I feel that God has been in my life throughout, from day one. He's protected me throughout this series of issues we've dealt with. He was always there for us.
And what's kind of the picture of God that you came to have as you sort of rediscovered God?
As a Catholic, I'm only going from my experience, is that we experience God as a far figure. He's far away from us. He's not our friend. He's our friend, but he's far away. If we need to, that's how we have to communicate with him. Whereas after learning, reading the Bible, talking to Steph, talking to pastors, God is like a friend. He's next to you. He's with you no matter what you want to have a conversation. As a Catholic, it was hard for me because I did not know how to pray. We prayed with the rosemary, the cross, and it's just like reciting tradition. I did not know how to pray to God. Like I said, I've only said one simple prayer: God help me. And that's when God sent Steph as we crossed paths.
So you came to see God not as this sort of distant God,
Yes.
but this close God that's involved in your life and is this close friend, and that really just made all the difference in the world when you had this accident take place.
Yes.
So, any final words to share with us as a church?
I'd like to say, no matter what your journey is, you always have to have God. There's always going to be ups and downs. And in our life, Steph's life, our kids' life, we're always going to have ups and downs in our life. But we always put God first, and we don't blame God for what we've done, what has happened.
Awesome. Thank you, Dom. Thanks for sharing your story. All right, story number 3. Crystal, make your way down.
LJ, thank you for your sharing your stories too.
So, Crystal, tell us a bit about yourself, your family. Introduce yourself to us.
Hi everybody. I'm Crystal Taylor, most commonly known as Mum for Riley, Charlie and Hudson, my 3 kids. And some of you are familiar faces. You may have seen me running around the background. It's things like Road to Bethlehem. For others of you, you'll be like, oh, isn't that my chaplain from school back at Nunawading Christian College? So I've been around Melbourne all my life. And yeah, really lovely to our family called Burwood, our church family now, which is lovely.
Fantastic. So the story you're going to share with us is from when you were, I think it started when you were about 22. What did life look like for you back when you were 22?
Yeah. So maybe I should share where I am now, because I think that gives a bit of context for where I am compared to where I was when I was 22. So now I work in community development, working alongside quite vulnerable communities. And some of those communities probably come across your news feed occasionally for all the wrong reasons. And I work to help them come together and realise the change and healing that they need. And so it's a really privileged work. It's a really tough work as well. And I love it. I love that work. But I wasn't always doing this work. I started out in ministry. So I was studying youth work, and I was actually in the inaugural youth pastoral workers group at Lilydale Church back in the day. So I was one of the first 4 youth pastoral workers, and that set me on a path for ministry. So my early years, I was the chaplain at Nunawading Christian College. I was the youth minister at Ringwood Church for a few years. I spent a very short period of time. I was in one of the first groups that did the distance study of theology, and worked at Nunawading Church as the youth minister for a little while.
Awesome. So you're a youth minister, chaplain, you were at YPW, all of these things are happening.
And life was good.
Life was good.
Life was good. And then...
What happened?
22, Sean and I had recently gotten married. I was loving work. We were doing some great stuff. I was loving being at the school. I was loving being at Ringwood Church. And it was mid-January. I very vividly remember this. It was mid-January, and I woke up one morning and my wrist hurt. It was this left wrist. And as you do, you kind of go, oh, I must have slept on it wrong. It went away during the day and I didn't think anything of it. And the next morning I woke up and the same wrist hurt again. I was like, oh, that's a bit weird. I must be sleeping on it weirdly. So then I remember the next night I petitioned my hand up here so that I wouldn't roll on it in the night. And I woke up the third morning and it hurt again. And you're kind of like, oh, this is annoying mostly. And then the fourth night, I woke up the next morning and both wrists hurt. And I just knew inside of me something was wrong. So it took about, over that next week, both wrists would hurt whenever I woke up in the morning. And then I woke up one morning and both my feet hurt. And it was painful to walk. And I was walking around, there was this about 2 weeks where I'm like, is it in my head? Everyone's like, oh, 1 minute she's complaining about sore ankles. The next minute she's walking around fine because it would kind of go away. And we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what it was. And so I headed off to the doctor, as you do. You go to the GP, had this beautiful GP, and I started on the roller coaster that I know some of you have known, and some of you know other people who may be going through that, which is test after test after test. And you go and you have these tests, and then you emotionally and mentally walk over that bridge reconciling whatever diagnosis you're being tested for. And then you get the phone call, no, it's not lupus. And you have this bittersweet moment of like, oh, it's not lupus. But then what is it? I kind of wish it was, so at least I knew what I was dealing with. And right through this time, it was tough. It was really tough. The pain was getting worse and worse. And I remember Sean would put pillows to the bathroom so I could walk to the toilet because it hurt too much to walk. He would turn the shower on in the morning before he went to work because I couldn't turn the shower handle. So he would start the shower so I could just bump it. If you were doing Bible studies with me at this time, because I was working the whole time, I probably sneakily asked you, can you just open the door for me? It was because I couldn't open the door. There was so many things going on behind the scenes, and if you've got someone in your life who's going through that roller coaster, they're probably just head down coping, and that's what we did. We just head down and were coping through the day, and it was really tough.
So did you find answers?
So 3 months. 3 months of
Wow.
that roller coaster. 3 months of things getting worse and worse and not knowing what was going on. And, finally we had a diagnosis. It was rheumatoid arthritis. Now, if you are wondering what rheumatoid arthritis is, your grandma probably has it, or your grandpa probably has it. It's an old person's illness generally, and it is, for the most part, genetic. And it's an autoimmune illness. So what that means is my immune system had decided that the tissue in my joints was the enemy, and it was doing everything it could to fight that enemy. And so my fingers, my wrists, my hands, I got stuck. There's little things you remember. One day my elbow locked like that. And for 4 months, my elbow wouldn't extend. Because the joint just locked. My feet, my knees, and it would move around. So you'd have like 3 months of it'd be in your hands, and then it would move to the feet and the knees, and it's debilitating, and it's continuous, and it impacts the smallest little things. You can't open the bottle of juice to have an apple juice, right, in the morning. It's the smallest little things. And all this time I was the chaplain, I was the pastor, youth pastor at Ringwood Church, and I deeply believe God is a healing God. He does miracles. I know it. One day you can hear Riley's story. It's his story to tell, but I know that miracles happen in moments. And so I would go to sleep. We would go to sleep and pray for healing. Deeply pray for healing. And I had people in the church, praying for healing, telling me, faith of a mustard seed. You hear all of these things growing up. Faith of a mustard seed. God can move mountains. And when it comes to that moment and you get on your knees, well, I couldn't get on my knees, so I'd sit there. And I'd pray with everything I had, and I'd wake up the next morning a little bit worse. And I'd pray again, and it would be a little bit worse. And it was so, so tough to hold what you deeply, deeply believe in faith and the reality you're living through. And so we journeyed this for a little while. And so I got the diagnosis. And around the time I got the diagnosis, I had 2 very distinct moments. One was about 10 minutes. One was about a week, where I had no pain. And they were God-given moments. One of them was going to the Year 10 snow trip for the school camp, and I had a whole week of no pain.
And you were skiing or snowboarding?
Yeah, I loved it. I snowboarded
Wow.
for the whole week. It was brilliant. Another one was I paraglide, and so I had a flight, and I had as I took off, I couldn't hold on, and then as I got in the air, the pain went away and I could fly.
Wow.
And it was literally like very spiritual moment of I can fly,
Wow.
and it invested this deep knowledge that there was a next, and God had hold of that next. And so as I got this diagnosis, we went through 4 different doctors. And the prognosis was horrid, that I would be in a wheelchair by 30. I was 22. I'd be in a wheelchair by 30, that this wasn't curable, that this was my life, that they didn't know there was no cure, we can just make you comfortable. And it was horrid, and so I just kept looking for new doctors until I found one that was like, yeah, we'll get you as close to better as possible. he had that
Hope.
hope.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the top specialist. He was just like a doctor in Ferntree Gully. But he was like, I'll get you there.
Most optimistic.
The most optimistic. And so we ventured on this, I don't want to call it experimental, but it was a bit of a, we've just got to trust the journey kind of thing. And put me on some really savage medications. And there was lots of things that happened over this whole time. And I want to share the time I pray for healing. And this journey went for 4 years.
Wow.
4 years of journeying this. I have a husky voice because I got nodules on my voice box. Just a little side thing. Had to have surgery. I didn't speak for 5 months. I kid you not. Sean and I still use little sign languages to communicate because we had to communicate through sign language. I had fortnightly blood tests because I was on this medication that I tell you, the decisions you make as teenagers, teens, the decisions you make today impact your life. God had never put in my heart to try alcohol or try drugs despite the rest of my friends being in that space. And it was that I had not had alcohol or drugs that meant I could stay on this really savage medication for 4 years. And that's what helped. Health, healthy eating, all of these things helped me journey from a prognosis where I would be in a wheelchair by 30 to I was in remission. And when I fell pregnant with Riley, it went away like that. And I've never had it since. And then when I broke my wrist about 8 years ago playing touch football, because, when you can run again, you run and you play touch football and you do all those things that you love. And I broke my wrist and I asked the people doing the x-rays to check for damage because I was really curious to know what damage was about 5 years later.
From the arthritis.
They couldn't tell that I'd ever had arthritis. It was amazing. And God healed, but it took 4 years to heal. God doesn't always heal like that. Sometimes he takes you on the journey of healing, not the instantaneous moment.
Wow, what a story. And when I caught up with you last week, the thing I remember you saying, when I said, what did you do this morning? You said, I went for a run. And then I was hearing the story going, wow, that's just miraculous that God, you've had such a turnaround and God has really helped you with your health in that way. So, as a way to sort of wrap up, where have you seen God in this story and what's the lesson that you'd like to leave with us?
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about this last night, and so often we ask God for the instantaneous answer, and when it doesn't come in the way we think it should be, we get a little bit dejected. And there was those moments where I was really dejected. But as I look back, and even within it, if you talk to me kind of 2 years in, I would have been telling you that God's giving me determination, like this deep knowledge that there's a next. The right people to come in at the right times to just go, hey, you got this. A deep empathy of what it is to be vulnerable and to be going through something really tough. And I think of that verse in, I think it's Isaiah 64, where God talks about we're the clay and he is the potter and he's making and moulding us. And I look back now and the journey of healing was really tough, but it instilled in me, in us, the qualities, the deep knowledge and understanding of God's qualities of determination, of a hope for the next, of knowing what it is to be vulnerable and knowing what it is to go on a journey of healing. And where I am now is that I hold that space for others, for whole communities, as they are vulnerable journeying through healing, as they need to find determination, they need to know that there's a next for them and that that's hope-filled. Yeah. And God was teaching me those qualities. He was moulding me into that. And he's still moulding me. He's moulding every one of us through our experiences, teaching us, growing us. Because if we only ever stay as that lump of clay, that's all we ever are. And he's got such vision for us. And at 22, I had no idea what that vision was. But he's taken me on the journey. And he's still taking me on the journey, building those qualities that he wants to shine out. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Crystal and Laura Jane and Dom, for sharing your stories with us. And, yeah, thank you. And trusting us with those stories. And throughout all of them, I think what's really stood out to me is just the kind of God that we have, a God who's a close friend, who wants to journey with us through the little things, the big things, and that God who always has hope for us, and we can cling to that hope. So thank you so much. We'll just finish. Are we not having a song? No. LJ. Oh, there we go. Thanks, LJ.
Thanks. I'm just going to wrap up the service today in prayer, so please join me. Dear God, thank you for Dom and for Crystal. Thank you that we've been able to share your story in us and how you've worked in our lives. Thank you for the privilege of being a part of your story, for building your kingdom. Lord, I just pray for the stories that have been shared today, that they're hitting home for some people, maybe speaking to some situations that people are experiencing. I thank you for the privilege that we have to be able to serve and extend your kingdom through, the things that you've done in our lives. Lord, I thank you that you are a God who is not distant. Thank you that you are all about relationship over ritual. And thank you that you bring people into our lives who can point us towards you. Lord, I just pray that as we leave this place today and go on with what we've got planned, that we will stop and we will pause. We will be listening for your voice speaking into us. Please help us to seek out opportunities to share our stories, but also importantly to listen to the stories of those around us. I just pray that you'll give us opportunities to bless one another, to help those who are vulnerable, and to be aware of the way that you're working in our lives. We love you and we thank you. Amen.